Chapter 57 of The Goddess of Atvatabar by William Richard Bradshaw. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Nigel Fisher. The Combined Ceremony of Marriage and Coronation. The day of our marriage and coronation as King and Queen of Atvatabar at length arrived. The scene in the Bomidofia was of surpassing magnificence. For the first time in history, Leone sat before the throne of the gods, not as a goddess, but as queen, and I, her compeer, as king, sat beside her. Leone was attired in a loosely fitting robe of old ivory silk, over which was an outer network of lace formed of thread of gold, the design being a golden sun on the breast, which with its long streaming rays was held together by a golden cobweb that covered the entire figure of the queen. She also wore her belt of jewels. Beside her stood a page bearing her crown as Queen of Atvatabar. For myself, I had caused to be made a knightly suit of golden armour that shone mightily as I wore it on that eventful occasion. The priestesses of Egyptlosis, taught by a priest of decorative art from Gnaphistasia, had been for some time engaged in creating a tapestry of lace wrought with a thread of heavy bullion gold as a bridal gift to their queen. The design took the form of a winged twin soul in loving converse, in the centre surrounded by Atvatbarese arabesque, all held together by a most poetic fancy of floral scrolls, and formed of gold thread lacework. This enormous piece of work was 12 feet in width, 75 feet in length, and 4 inches in thickness. The gold used in its marvellous intricacies weighed 5 tons. Such was the glorious piece of tapestry that was hung over the side of the throne, and which, reaching downward 3/4 of its height, concealed a considerable part of the august structure. Around us swept the amphitheatre, filled with the leaders of the army and navy, the great officers of government, and the people of Atvatabar. Surrounding the base of the throne sat those priests and priestesses of Egyptlosis who had embraced the new faith of one body and one soul. The pontiff Charka performed the marriage ceremony when the roar of guns had subsided. He performed his august duties sustained by the splendours of music and the adoration of the people. "Wilt thou have this woman, Leone, Queen of Atvatabar, to be thy wife until death, according to the customs of our people, and not according to the customs of Egyptlosis?" "I will." "Wilt thou have this man, Lexington, King of Atvatabar, to be thy husband until death, according to the new faith of one body and one soul?" "I will." The deed was done. Around the throne swept a cyclone of twin souls, resolved on matrimony. In their bewildering flight they became radiant with strange transformations of feeling and gesture, and their songs symbolised the intensity of the great crisis that had arrived in the history of the nation. All around the amphitheatre rose the enormous multitude, as one soul shouting their joy. The guns of the fortress volleyed their thunders. The first act of the great drama ended amid the shouting of armed hosts, the singing of twin souls, and the hosannas of the multitude. The second scene was perhaps still more impressive. The Grand Chamberlain of the Palace, Cleparellium, had put into his phonograph beside us a coil containing the Charter of Coronation. Fitting a megaphone to the phonograph, there issued the following proclamation from the instrument, like a blast of music. "Charter of Coronation of their Majesties Lexington and Leone, King and Queen of Atvatabar. The crown and throne of the realm of Atvatabar, heretofore possessed in the persons of their ex-majesties King Aldmeri Bulmakar and Queen Toplissy, being now declared vacant by reason of the desertion, flight, deposition and defeat of said ex-majesties, and said crown and throne of Atvatabar being now possessed by both conquest and by will of the people, in the persons of their majesties Lexington and Leone, King and Queen of Atvatabar. Now, therefore, we, priests, nobles, statesmen and commanders of army and navy, as representatives of the people, do hereby confirm said possession of the crown and throne of this realm, by placing upon the head of Lexington and upon the head of Leone their respective crowns as King and Queen of Atvatabar, and do hereby render both King and Queen equal loyalty, fealty and homage as the true and rightful sovereigns of Atvatabar. Signed, Starbottle, Goylor of Kalnagor, First Minister of the Government. Charka, Pontiff of Memorialism, Gulor of Egyptlosis. Thubal, Gulois of Egyptlosis. Rakion, Gulor of Swandab, Commander-in-Chief of the Army. Wallace, Admiral of the Fleet. Yermul, Lord of Art, Goylor of Gnaphistasia. Grasnagalapas, Commander-in-Chief of the Bokkids. Laldemir, Goylor of Kioram. Minister of Police. Notothobok, Minister of Naval Affairs. Goldrock, Royal Treasurer, Dr. Merryferry, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Flat Hootley, Minister of War, Gerolio, Vice Commander of the Army, Coltonbury, Vice Commander of the Boccakids. During the declamation of the megaphone, the Pontiff Charker raised the crown to my head, while his consort Thubal raised the crown of the Queen to Leonie's head. We sat thus crowned amid the tremendous excitement. The guns of the fortress shook the Bormidofia with their explosions. The people shouted, "Life, health and prosperity to our sovereign lord and lady, Lexington and Leonie, King and Queen of Atvatabar." Men heard no sweeter music than the coronation march executed by 1,000 instruments. I realised as I sat with Leonie beneath the throne of the gods a portion of that immeasurable feeling of being universally exalted, universally loved, universally adored. It is true the fervour of idolatry for Leonie had largely subsided, but in its stead came a more perfect loyalty of soul and body on the part of priest and priestess. Souls that had balanced themselves, as it were, on the edge of a sword, once more stood on the solid earth. The magnificence of royalty, which kings born to the purple but rarely feel, was ours. Our sudden good fortune unveiled to us the splendours of power and riches and honour. The people themselves, enchanted with the product of their own abnegation, made their obeisance to us as gods. Leonie grew perceptibly paler with the intensity of her excitement. Her breast rose and fell more rapidly as the soarings of song told her that her supreme realisation of life and fortune as goddess had not wholly died with her apostasy, but that a new life no less glorious had begun. As for myself, seated on the focus of human endeavour, it thrilled me to think what power of realisation I possessed for things I had considered impossible and unattainable. I determined that art should sound the abysses of the inexpressible and bring from thence radiant symbols of all things, clothed with imagination and emotion. Invention would still further extend man's empire over matter. Soul, culture and spirit power would be cultivated in a reformed Egyptlosis. Leonie, mystical and divine, would ever rule Queen of Hearts with the sorcery of her beauty. End of chapter 57.